Ladies and gentlemen, the Cry Brothers.
All this and more coming up on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
BBC at DMA for GTA.
360 retirement.
And crime pays?
All these stories and more coming up on today's show.
Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.
Hello, Neil. How are you today?
Oh, hello, Dave.
You're going to insult Scottish people again, are you?
Well, there's going to be lots of Scottish chat today, not just because you're here. There is going to be Scottish chat. We're going to go to Dundee and beyond.
Yes.
Lots of fun stories submitted to the subreddit this week, so thank you, everyone, for sending them in. Busy week at my end at the cave. 5 solid days of DIY. So finally took the plunge and decided to build the dev den. Instigated really by the looming deadline, which is the end of this month when I'm going to take some parental leave. I want to get this finished. I want to get everything working in there. This is an extension of the cave, an extended part of the cave, and a new exhibit to celebrate game development and music creation, and to display everything really from bedroom coding and home stuff like Amos and Basic, through to, well, the PDS system that Jason is going to be exhibiting, a slightly more professional system, and some of those dev kits that we've got from, what have we got? PlayStation 2 era and things like that, the Nintendo DS, and music creation. Want to display things like the MT32 and the sound canvases, and Jason's got this lovely big Korg keyboard plugged into an Atari Mega ST, I think, which is really nice, really nice. So lots of storytelling to be done in there, reinforced by Jason himself being in there, who can give a first-hand account of what it was like in his period, and guest visitors. And speaking of guest visitors, Andrew Haig popped in at the weekend, just as a visitor to the cave, who was the lead designer of Colin McRae's Rally. There's some more Scottish for you. Colin McRae Rally.
Did we comment on it the other week? Was it the same person?
Yes, same person. Yeah. So, and I had lovely chats with him and showed him around the cave and the arcade. So that was really nice too. And it will be really nice when that dev den area is finished to, because it's slightly quieter, it's slightly away from the hustle and bustle of the main cave. You've actually got a chance to sit and chat to people like that and hear their stories. And Andrew did agree verbally to do a retro tea break with me in the near future, so I'll get hold of that.
I'll have a little
those
tea break.
Stories. So that'd be good. We've also started the build of the Lemmings arcade cabinet, which needs to be as close to finished as possible by the end of the week because Mike Daly's coming to visit. And last time I spoke
Daly.
to Richard,
We might mention him again.
We might mention him again. Richard's dealing with that build. There will be a video on it, but I think we're going to leave some little bits for Mike to do, maybe applying some of the stickers, a bit of last minute painting or something. We'll get him to roll his sleeves up and get involved in the final build of the cabinet. So that'll be fun. And we have quite possibly, not 100% confirmed, but verbally agreed to buy a Space Ace cabinet for the arcade. So
Space Ace is the kind of sequel, not the sequel, but the follow-up to Dragon's Lair, which is Dawn Bluth animated
Laserdisc.
Choose your left or right option, Laserdisc. Amazing multimedia experience.
It will cost you 50p a go.
And it's broken today.
Yeah. So we couldn't get a hold of a Dragon's Lair. They're slightly more desirable just for reasons. People remember that having a big impact when it came in. Space Ace, not such a big impact because people had got to grips with the technology and understood its limitations. And I don't want to use the word playable, but it is a slightly more playable game in that it's a bit more forgiving. It gives you more visual cues.
I'll be honest. I mean, the main thing about them is the technology. It's not the gameplay. The gameplay is really simple, and quite often I will criticize games for being too much like Dragon's Lair. Yeah.
But I think we need some Laserdisc representation just to represent that story and tell that story in the arcade. So Space Ace it is. Needs a little bit of doing up, but that's what we love doing.
Did you not have a Dragon's Lair too?
There was one briefly passed through our storage for someone else.
Okay.
There was talks about hoping to buy it at one point, but then they didn't want to sell it to us, so it moved on again.
Because that was the one that someone had cut in a Street Fighter 2 set of controls or something to it.
No, you're thinking about Marble Madness. There was a Marble Madness from the container, which had a Street Fighter 2 marquee.
No. I don't know about a Street Fighter 2 marquee. It was a Dragon's Lair 2, and the control panel had been cut apart, and it had been over the years. And Holly had it connected up to a black and white television.
Yeah, she did have it connected to a black and white telly. I don't think it was Street Fighter 2, but yeah, it needed a lot of work. And
Street
that's
Fighter
why
2 was just an example. That's what someone's likely put on it.
Yeah.
That's what everybody put on these old machines. These wonderful, beautiful old machines were made to play rubbish games.
Yeah, that's the old stuff. Turn it into something new that can make us some money in the arcade. Street Fighter 2 is. Yeah, I get what you mean. But yeah, that one didn't come to fruition. But hopefully, fingers crossed, Space Ace will, and that will be a really nice thing to try out. So that's been my week. There's a big blank space in the notes document here, Dave, when I say, what have you been up to this week? Have you just been sleeping?
Oh, the new shed's in finally. The new shed is in.
Oh, the new shed. Shed news.
Shed news. And the catio will hopefully be done this week. And that will unlock a whole lot of things for me to get things sorted out here, give me a bit more storage space. But nothing's really been happening here. Nothing's happened much. I am excited about a little bit of news from Heber. Will we discuss that today?
Is that their new product?
Yes, will we? Or we leave it till next week?
We can I think we should, because they announced it on Twitter last week, didn't they?
Yeah, so the Heber produced the Mr. Multi-System, which is a fantastic consoleized version of Mr. And they've now gone on to announce a new product called the Multi-Pi, which to me at least looks to be the same kind of idea, but with a Raspberry Pi board inside instead of a DE10 FPGA thing in it. I'm not going to be beta testing it. I don't feel I have anything to bring to that. But you're setting up beta testers for it now. The product's been announced. When's it going on sale?
I'm not Heber, so I can't tell you that. But I know it's going on. I think it's going to go on a pre-sale in this instance, right, because we want to get a feel for the demand and make sure that there's enough out there. But the whole system has been designed, tested, EMC tested, all the rest of that. It's ready to go. It's ready to fly up the doors. So there won't be a great wait from pre-ordering to receiving. But we're going to find out a lot more this week. I think Heber have got some plans to do some announcements, as well as some other products as well, related products. Okay. Again, not my place to talk about them, but they're going to announce some more things. And we will, of course, do a little video demonstrating that soon. It will appear on shop.heber.co.uk. That's their shop, where there are other products as well. But the Multi-Pi will appear there, shop.heber.co.uk. So keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on their social media account. Keep an eye on my accounts, and we'll make noise about that. But it's going to be a really nice integrated way of using the Pi as a console. Mm. More news as it happens, Dave.
Yeah.
Should we go into stories? What are we doing? I've forgotten how this podcast works.
We normally don't ramble for this long.
I know.
Let's get into it. I'm actually Scottish.
No.
Well, I'm sure that some of our listeners may have noticed that by now. And because of that, I'm always interested in technology from Scotland. I'm delighted to have an IBM PS2 made in Greenock, which is the other side of my nearest city, Glasgow.
Oh, I was about to say, where is Greenock? So it's in the Glasgow area, is it?
Well, it's not Glasgow, but if I'm 10 miles from Glasgow, and if I travel to Glasgow and then out the other end, it's kind of the mirror of me that's 10 miles outside Glasgow, so on the coast. Yeah. So IBM had a massive campus there. I know that the ZX Spectrum was made in huge numbers in the Timex factory in Dundee, famously. And someone told me that the diddy little Amiga A600 was also made in Scotland, or at least some of them were made in Scotland. There's been one or two Scottish inventions over the years and discoveries, and I'm going to mention just a couple to give you a flavour for it. So these are either by Scottish people around Scotland or some kind of link there. So there is tarmac roads, the pedal bicycle, the pneumatic tyre, tubular steel, the Falkirk wheel, coal gas lighting, the Stirling heat engine, carbon brushes for dynamos, Clark gas Clark Cycle gas engine, wave-powered electricity generator, the first passenger steamboat, the first iron hull steamship, the first practical screw propeller, the hot blast oven, the steam hammer, wire rope, cordite, hollow pipe drainage, the Scotch plough, the mechanical reaping engine, the telephone, print stereotyping, roller printing, the adhesive stamp, the postmark, universal standard time, radio, the BBC, the teleprinter, radar, the ATM, the Encyclopaedia Britannica, gospel music, logarithms, modern economics, modern sociology, hypnotism, tropical medicine, modern geology, electromagnetism, Saturn rings, Proxima Centauri, latent heat, the incandescent light bulb, the Kelvin unit of temperature, criminal fingerprinting, the noble gases, the first cloned mammal, tractor beams, Australian rules football, curling, Gaelic football, cycling, golf, ice hockey.
But not Scotch eggs.
No, not Scotch eggs. They were made in England. Everyone thinks they're Scottish. They're not. Scotching is apparently a process in which you cook them. But what's the most important thing we did? Well, of course, it's Lemmings and Grand Theft Auto. Today's submission from Tessa de Merda is from BBC Archives, a wonderful place where short-ish video clips tell the true story of how it was like back in the day. Sometimes I think so much modern coverage is based on other modern coverage that we sometimes miss how it really was. So it's nice to get these little time capsules. We've actually been to DMA before in this show, a segment with Dominic Diamond before he went to Games Master, where he talked about piracy and visited their Dundee offices. But this was some years before this.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Was that clip the office that we see in this clip, or was that clip the little offices that were above the pink shop on the high street that you sometimes see photos of?
I don't know, but it would have been years before this. So before Dominic Diamond went to Games Master, so it would be 1991 type thing.
Yeah.
DMA Design still exist. They did start off in the 80s doing Amiga games, one of the first places in the UK to focus on the Amiga first and not do ST games and port them to Amiga or do games for the ST and Amiga at the same time. Their first game was called Menace, and then they had Blood Money, and famously they started the design of Walker and then canned it and completed it after Lemmings, but Lemmings used the tiny little sprites and the creativity of them being that they were absolutely tiny, yet somehow you got personality from those few pixels.
Yeah, you really did. DMA went on to become Rockstar North. No,
That's
Rockstar
right.
Studios, Rockstar North, and now they're known as Rockstar Games UK Limited.
Yeah, they're a huge company now. Ballistics, Blood Money, and Shadow the Beast released before Lemmings, and then Hired Guns after it. Lemmings, of course, was a massive game in the computer game scene that was rapidly expanding at the time. It landed really well across so many different platforms, and it's one of the perhaps the first UK games to go global that way. I'm sure some did, but not the way that Lemmings did. Lemmings was a phenomenon. And DMA got the design dead right with the release of it having, I think, a demo ahead of time, meaning that people were ready to buy the game when it came out. The talk was already there before the game was there. In fact, our own Chris 005 Game Up was delighted to pick up a copy when it was at Kickstart and got it signed by Mike Daly, the first DMA design employee himself.
Did Mike sign it in his usual less than polite way? Because I know he likes to add a few words when he signs things.
Yes.
Okay. Not safe for our show.
Yeah. If Lemmings was a big game, then GTA Grand Theft Auto was massive. In the video, we hear them say they have, at this point in 1996, they have 100 staff at that point. Some 5 years after Lemmings, and I don't know how many had at the time of Lemmings, but it would have been a fraction of that. DMA would have been one of the first properly huge game companies, and of course the GTA series has gone on to make billions of revenue. No wonder Mike can afford to be a patron of this show. And Wikipedia says in 2018 they were up to 650 members of staff. That's a huge organisation. Now, this little clip is a bit of a time portal for me, hearing Scottish accents with people who in the 90s were about the same age that I was when this was recorded. So I could have been there. That's what I was thinking. I could have been there. I could have been
there,
old
man.
enough.
I could have been there.
I could have been a contender. I might have been old enough to have finished uni, got a computing degree, and got a job for DMA and help make GTA. Perhaps, maybe would I still enjoy the games industry? Would it turn me off from games?
I'm not sure a degree would have been required at that point. I think college at most, and bedroom coding and a demo disc. I think a demo disc might have done you, Dave, if you'd presented something good.
I never did, though. I didn't get a job in IT, never mind the games industry. These days, I work for a bank. Maybe if I had worked myself up to the board of Rockstar, I could be the lead on their Ultima remake. Their Ultima remake that they're not doing and doesn't fit their studio at all, but I could be the lead on doing it. Neil, what do you think of the video? And do you think there might be an alternative history with you as a game developer?
Oh, it's a lovely video, isn't it? It's really nice to watch, just to see. I mean, whenever you see videos from this period, it's the haircuts, it's the way the clothes are slightly baggier than they are today. It's the decor. It's just really nice to watch. The first thing I noticed when it starts, they've got a couple of arcades in their break room.
Yeah.
Very generic Jammer arcades, one playing R-Type in front of a pool table. You don't see pool tables enough anymore, do you? So that was obviously what they like to do in their downtime, play R-Type and play pool. GTA hadn't been released at this point, so it was a real pivotal moment in the industry and in DMA's life. Well, you're chuckling away there, Dave. What have I said?
I'm just thinking about what you're going to say next. I'm just looking at your little note that's coming next.
Yeah, there's a chap called Dave who, Rory, the BBC presenter, goes across to Dave and he's driving around in GTA and he asks him what he's doing. And he's very dour, isn't he? He's like the anti-hype man. We've got this new game. It's coming out. What are you doing in this game? Well, I'm just sort of driving around trying to run people over. Come on, Dave, get excited. Come on.
Neil, try and do the accent.
No, I can't do a Scottish accent or any accent for that matter.
That's why I want you to try and do it.
Rory does then appear in a series of very uncomfortable positions, from kneeling on the floor to trying to wedge an office chair between two people to get everyone in shot. That made me chuckle. Lots of CRT monitors on desks. I liked seeing that. Rory then says hello to the only lady in the room. Did you see this bit?
Yeah, I think his name was Fiona.
Yeah, it says hello to the only lady in the room, who tells him she went to college. And then he asks, how did you get a job here? To which she replies, I went to college and then I applied for the job like anyone else. And then he rounds it off by excitedly saying, and you've always played computer games? You know, it's sort of surprised, a woman playing computer games manner, which is something he doesn't ask anyone else in the office. That kind of stands out a bit.
Yeah.
And then we meet Gary Timmons, who is much more excitable to camera than David was. Gary speaks very well about the team. Also looks a bit like a young John Hare. Did you notice that?
No, I didn't know.
Oh, I thought you did. But yeah, really nice insight into the UK game development at the time, a snapshot in time. I wish there were more videos like this. I've come across a pretty shaky handy cam tour of Microprose's UK office in the 90s.
That's down you a bit.
I'd love to have seen Codemasters from the period where it's described in various books that there are a series of porter cabins. I would have liked to see someone pop into the porter cabins, here's the Oliver twins presenting their latest game. Here's, whoever, the Darling brothers working on something. That would have been fun. There's also a very short video from 1988 I found recently at Ocean Software, where Keith Chegwin, of all people, is paying them a visit. It's a very short video. In contrast to DMA in the mid-90s, in this video, this is, DMA have got 100 or so staff.
Yeah.
This is Keith Chegwin interviewing Mark Jones at Ocean. And Mark says, there's usually two people on a project, a programmer and a graphic designer. So that's the difference between 88 and 95. They were turning out chart-topping games back then with two people. The next 7 years, up to this next video, that's when it exploded. That's when game development teams evolved to cope with the 16 bits, the PCs, the PlayStations, and beyond. Very, very different industry. I'll put a link to that earlier Ocean video as well in the show notes. Yes, Dave?
Yeah, and it's important maybe to think about the number of companies that failed to survive in the evolution from small 2 or 3 people teams to having to have 100 people on a game. They maybe they failed before it got to 100, but they failed to manage projects, and that was the real difficulty, going from a single bedroom coder to a couple of people, then going to having a whole team of people who in many cases must just have been simply employees rather than absolutely bedroom coder addicts doing 16-hour days.
Yeah.
And also, at this time, or round about this time, John Romero was opening up an office at the top of this $350,000 a month, whatever it was, thing over in America on the back of Quake and Doom, opening up this ridiculously expensive, wonderful Willy Wonka's world of game development, whereas in Dundee it was people who you would expect to see from college.
Yeah, which is nice. It's relatable. Yeah, especially for you, like you said, hearing the accents, putting yourself in that time again. If I could have made 2 or 3 different decisions, and maybe I could have got in the door there. But if anyone else has got any links to video tours like this, I would love to see them, because they're just great. And they're also something that I could display in this new exhibit area of the cave, showing development offices of old. The area we're developing the cave, we're not making it. It's not like the W.H. Smiths that we've made. We're not turning it into a recreation of an actual development office with nicotine stained ceilings and ashtrays on the desk. We're not doing that. It's just a nice space in which to present this stuff. But I do love watching the videos of those. The DMA one is not that. It's not a nicotine stained ceiling. I think we're on one step from that now. We're going into the more professional era. But it's nice to see all the eras, from Matt Smith in his bedroom and the Oliver twins to small teams like, I should ask Jason himself if he's got any pictures, because he rented a very small office for his company was called Pagoda Software. There were 2 of them, him and Tom. Wonder if he's got any pictures that we can display, through to things like the DMA video. So please, if you've seen any, please share them, because I'd love to watch them.
So the video is only 6 minutes long. As I said, it's a bit of a time portal back to the 90s in Scotland. Give it a watch. And I think this is probably... This video is probably the last step in the whole evolution, and you could probably recognise this setup as what the modern setup is, not too different from it. So give it a watch. We are sponsored this week, thank you very kindly to Pixel Addict for sponsoring us. The current issue is the Elite one with the wonderful front cover of the Elite symbol. There's a lot more in it. There is the story of the Valiant Turtle, the roving plotter robot for the BBC Micro that we all did at school. Did you have a Valiant Turtle at school?
No, I was aware of it because we saw it when the TV was wheeled out and we saw the rich school with the BBC Micros. They always had the turtle in the video, but we had to make do with the screen, the little triangle, the virtual turtle, and we just had to do it on the screen.
There's lots more there. There's an interview with Ed Lomas from Sega stuff, Alex Trowers from Bullfrog. Lots of stuff going on there in the magazine. If you want it, you can go to the website, which is
pixel.addict.media.
And you can have it delivered to your own house.
Your delivered by Moose.
Moose. There's a moose loose about this house. You can get it as a PDF, which is the way I read it, and read it at your leisure. It's a great magazine. Please support them. Pixel.addict.media. Thank you for supporting us.
Fourth Directive submitted this next story over on our subreddit, which is reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro, if you'd like to do the same. This story is as much a public service announcement as it is a story, because on the 29th of July, just over 2 weeks away, the Xbox 360 store and marketplace will be retired. Now, my first reaction to that is, oh no, that's too soon. The Xbox 360 is a current gen console. No, it's absolutely not. Then I remembered it was a console released in November 2005. So that's 23 years and a bit old. And that's a pretty fair length of time for a manufacturer to support it. More than fair, I'd say, to support a product for that long with online services that cost them money. Or to put it another way, that's the equivalent of Atari supporting the Atari 2600 from its release in 1977 through to the year 2000. So that kind of puts it in perspective a bit, doesn't it? What does this mean for people who enjoy the system, or those of us who haven't quite got nostalgic for it yet, but we know we'll probably want to dip into it in the future? I count myself amongst one of those as an early adopter of the system. I know I'll want to go back and revisit it at some point. Now, Microsoft says that this affects people in various ways, but it says that multiplayer and online service support on games, well, that will vary whether that's gone or not based on the game publisher, because they're the ones that provide that service. So a lot of that will have gone already. I think it's fair to say that we will be relying on third-party tools, like there's one called Xlink Kai. I think that's still current, used to use that. What that lets you do is if your game has LAN support, it lets you link up over the internet as sort of a layer in between to turn that LAN into WAN support. So you can still play people remotely. So there are tools like that that can help us and cater to certain types of game. There's nothing that's been reported that I can see so far that will stop you from playing physical discs or that will leave the console locked down to hinder future gamers in any way. So really, all in all, a fair announcement. Look, guys, it's pretty old now. It's time to wind down the support that we give it, and I've got no problem with that.
Do these games have extensive patches, or is this before the patch era? I'm just wondering.
Well, there will be updates and patches to these games, yeah.
Wondering if you still get those or not.
So this is the store. There'll be achievements. There'll be things you can buy within the games. Some of these things are going to continue to work, but eventually it's all going to stop working, isn't it? Well, not all of it. I mean, the extras are going to stop. You'll still be able to play the game. There's nothing reported that I think will stop you from playing physical discs. It did get me thinking, though, on a topic that I think comes up quite often on the show, and it's becoming more and more important. Could this be the last generation of games consoles where its retirement means we can still visit the nursing home, we can still pop in and see the Xbox 360? Hello, Grandad, how you doing? Do you fancy a quick game of, I don't know, checkers, whatever you play? Just pop in, pop the disc in, and we can play. That generation being the 360, the PlayStation 3, and the Nintendo Wii era, the 7th gen consoles. This is the era where it was then assumed all of a sudden that we always have always on broadband internet connections at home as standard, and they tapped into that. Beyond that, we move into the 8th generation, which is the Wii U, the PS4, the Switch, and the Xbox One, where online reliance gets heavier again, and retro gaming on them, it's going to get trickier in 15 years' time with those. Well,
on some of them, at least. Yeah, the Switch seems to be the one that that stands out as not being quite the same as the rest. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how much online services depend on simply having an account to use your Switch, logging in before you even run a game. I'm not quite sure how it's sort of, it feels like borderline there as well, but it's going to get trickier than the 7th gen. But hopefully conversations like this around the topic will lead to a way of preserving these gaming experiences in future. It needs to happen. We need to keep talking about it. We need to push for preservation of these experiences before we get completely locked out of them in future. But anyway, let's go back to the original point of the story, the Xbox 360. Did you have one, Dave? What are your memories?
So I've never owned any Xboxes ever. I sometimes do get a bit of FOMO, as we talked last week. I am wrecked by FOMO on a regular basis, as are you, for the reasons that you do mention. I thought I would like to have one and collect the discs. It's nice to buy. It's nice to collect games. But if you can collect games that cost buttons, like these do, then that'd be nice, and then not need to have anything else. And I did, for a brief moment, start to look at buying one, and possibly a PS3. Is it PS3 and the Xbox 360? Are that the two?
That's the same era, yeah.
As of the same era. I feel like I missed out on loads of console games. I did miss out on loads of console games, but again, that's my FOMO talking. If there was all the time in the world, would I run out of games? No, because I can play the same ones more than once.
I feel like as we come into this 7th gen era, part of the... I played fewer games. I played games to completion, and I played games, quite in-depth games, but I played far fewer on these platforms, partly because I was now a working man, and a lot of my time was taken up working. and I was just a bit more time poor at this point, so I had to be very careful about choosing what I played when I played it, and to get maximum enjoyment out of the time that I had. Which meant I had an Xbox 360. I loved it, but I didn't have many games throughout its life for it. Things like Project Gotham 3, I played and played and played, but I knew if I was going to buy another game, I probably wouldn't have time to get the most out of it.
Yeah, and gaming did change at this point. It used to be in the 8 and 16-bit eras, you'd have lots more games, but you'd spend less time in each one. This time around, there are more games to buy. There was more choice than ever. But if you bought a game like Mass Effect 2, for example, that's around that area. If you bought a game like Mass Effect 2, then that was a good 40 or 50 hours to get through the main game, and that's if you only play it once. If you buy a game for your Atari ST or your Amstrad CPC back in the day, you wouldn't expect to get 40 or 50 hours of it unless it's something special like Elite.
Yeah, or Pirates, or Civilization, or something like that. But in these games, you're getting into a situation where a lot of the games, you're putting in 30 minutes in the blooming tutorial at the start of the game. So you've made a time investment, and then you're like, right, I've got to get the most out of this game now. It's less pick up and play. Yeah.
These things will come back to us through emulation, like we're seeing through the Mister Project, which is a couple of generations behind this, through console manufacturers themselves trying to find ways to sell us stuff, and just through normal emulation. I've had a check, and it's possible now with a decent PC to play Xbox 360 games to what appears to be a very high standard on your computer. I look at the basic specs, it said recommended 6 cores, so it's talking about a modern PC, but it's possible. The Xbox 360, though, was only discontinued in 2016. So I'm trying to work out, is this the right way to retire it? I know we talked about a game, The Crew, where they only had any possibility of selling it from 10 years at the point they licensed the music for it. And at the end of that point, they would have to pay more, which they clearly would never do for an old game like that, or the game would stop being able to be used. And they were selling that game for many years after that 10-year that window started. So at what point do you buy something and expect to have a reasonable use of it? And I think, to be honest, if you're buying an Xbox 360 in 2016, which is 11 years after it released, maybe expecting to have more than 8 years with it on the marketplace is a bit unrealistic. So I guess I can't really grumble here. And it comes down to what individual developers do with the games on the platform.
I did actually get a 360 very early doors because they were, as usual, there was the hype. They sold out. You couldn't get them in the shops. And I paid over the odds on eBay to get hold of mine in the first couple of weeks. Paid way too much for it. But I did very much enjoy it. I was really hoping that Microsoft would release Flight Sim for it. Had to wait a couple of generations for that to appear on consoles. But yeah, did enjoy it. And as I mentioned, Project Gotham 3, Halo 3, they're probably the two big ones that I played the most on it. But yeah, it gets me thinking, what will a retro computer museum look like in 25 years' time? Will the 8th gen consoles onwards, are they going to be consigned to glass boxes and then we're going to use these emulation options that you talked about? Or are we just going to have video playthroughs ripped from YouTube during the console's lifetime just to say, here's what games looked like on the PlayStation 5? I don't know. Will the Xbox 360 and the PS3 and the Wii be the last consoles that you can revisit and play without any features missing due to missing online services? Time will tell, but it's an interesting conversation, and we have made our public service announcement for all of those that are still clinging on to the 360. It's time to start thinking about letting it go.
Maybe we'll have PS5 emulation, where you'll have your own little Raspberry Pi running its own little server, and you can buy the DLC and you can buy the microtransactions with fake money that doesn't exist, and you can actually get these games and have all the bells and whistles you wanted without having to spend thousands of dollars on it.
Maybe, but when you get into things like the PS5, the hardware becomes less of a problem in my mind because you're switching to, that's a Zen 2 processor, that's an AMD processor. Yeah. So it's becoming more PC-like. And the problem, like you say, is the online services at that point. So there needs to be a way to emulate them. We'll have to find out. When you and I are in the nursing home, we'll find out.
Yeah. No, spit on Mass Effect 2. I'd like to welcome 2 new patrons. Thank you very much for signing up.
I'd like to welcome the new patrons this week.
You welcome them. You welcome the new patrons.
The honour of welcoming the new patrons.
Will you do a good job?
I'll do a good job. I want to say a big welcome and thank you to new twirlers, Oven Chips and Olivia. Have I said that right?
Yeah. I like the name Oven Chips. It's the most mundane, one of the most mundane objects. Oven Chips.
Oven Chips.
Welcome. Chips.
Oven Chips, welcome. And Olivia, welcome.
Olivier. Yeah.
Olivier, thank you so much for supporting the show. And if you want to be cool like Oven Chips and Olivier, go to patreon.com/This Week in Retro and sign up to be an official twirler.
An update on Japan and floppies. We've talked about Japan making the decision to stop using them. Well, now it's happened. It's all over for government submissions in Japan on a floppy disk. They finally got there. I find it amusing that in the article someone said, I wonder if floppy disks will start appearing on auction sites. Might happen, I suspect.
Might happen.
The fax is next in their crosshairs.
There's been an update on Taki Udon's Mr. Adventures. You may remember we talked about the DE10 clone that he created, set to cost under $100, which should shake up the Mr. world. At the time, he also mentioned that he was working on a handheld, and he's now announced a sub $150 Mr. handheld with a AMOLED screen. I haven't seen yet. Has he changed the name of that Mr. clone? Because originally he announced it was going to be called Mr. Pi, which was terribly confusing.
Don't know if he's relented on that yet. There was a lot of feedback for him saying, don't do this, mate. Don't do it.
Oh, what's in a name? The product itself looks fantastic.
Yeah.
Definitely one to watch out for. And this handheld is one to watch out for. See if it comes to fruition. I love what he's doing, and I know you do too, Dave, not only for what he's done, but also because it's opening up minds to alternative hardware on which to enjoy Mr. And I hope to see lots of similar projects pop up in the coming years. Lots of choice, low-cost choice, expensive premium choice, handhelds, just to suit how you want to do your FPGA gaming.
Yeah, I'm quite impressed with this one because it's not, you think $150, you must have cut some corners. He appears not to. He says it's going to be state-of-the-art controllers on it. AMOLED screen is great as well. The whole thing just, it seems it's shouting too good to be true, but there's no reason for me to say too good to be true other than it just looks amazing. I just hope he looks as if he's going to do it in volume at the right price. He sounds as if he knows what he's doing. This is going to be fantastic, assuming that we get them. There was some criticism, or maybe feedback is better, from a viewer about the content of last week's episode. They has been expecting us to do a 15-year review of LGR's channel. So we're sorry if you felt misled by that, giving it a title of 15 years of LGR, but it's a good time to explain what we do here. We pick 3 items submitted by our viewers to the subreddit, and we use them as a starting point for a hopefully interesting discussion. We make 1 episode of this every week. We prepare in advance some notes on what we want to say. We obviously have to do a small amount of research, and Duncan edits it, and it's then released on a Saturday. It is actually a fair bit of work, and if time wasn't a pressure, we'd be able to do things like dozens of hours of research into each story, but for obvious reasons, we can't. But the show isn't to produce that, it's to have a discussion about these things. So the takeaway is that we always pick from the subreddit, and we do always use it as a springboard for a round of discussion. And following that, we also pick maybe the top half dozen or so items that we didn't choose for a shorter discussion, which we do in briefs.
Yeah, and LGR himself did leave a lovely comment on the YouTube video, just saying thank you. So if Clint's happy, then I think we hit the brief on that one. And speaking of briefs, Dave,
it's Dave's briefs. Sam Coink shows us a picture of an unusual find at his parents' workshop, a DOS compatibility card for a Power Macintosh 6100. So this is a 486DX266 with DOS 6.22 and Windows 3.1 all in the box. I had no idea this thing existed. It must have been one of the most expensive ways to do DOS. Buy a Macintosh and then turn it into DOS.
Nam Tab Mai has sent in a link for a BBC video from a guy based in Wolverhampton who has made his career in the modern day to create custom arcades and gaming travel cases. I'm almost disappointed that Rory Callan-Jones wasn't there to present that one on the BBC and take us full circle back to the DMA story. But it's a man in Wolverhampton living out his dream and showing that it is possible to do that in the world of the sphere of retro gaming.
Maybe you should do a road trip, Neil. It sounds quite interesting.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe I should, Dave.
Specific Low 9474 has an image of a spoof TV program, The ZX Files, from Sea Folks. Mulder and Scully investigate tales of a manic miner, an attack in an attic, and the curious story of a dizzy egg. Please allow 7 minutes for this program to load.
Starcade 2084 gives us a link to Time Extension, where Howard Scott Warshaw has an update on his sequel to Yar's Revenge. Yar! He's in talks with Atari. He's the original developer of the 1982 game for the 2600, and it's one of the best for the machine. So perhaps we'll see a sequel by the original developer with the Atari name on it, which would be very cool indeed all these years later.
I'd like to play it on my 2600. The sequel's intended to be for modern computers, but also for the 2600 as well, which has been re-released.
Will you buy it or will you pirate it, Dave?
I will buy it. If I can buy a game, I'll buy it. Pirate is pirating. Who would support pirating? Who would do it?
Yarr!
PC game Outrun Coast to Coast. So the 2006 game was an extremely well-received Outrun sequel. They highly polished this. They got the feeling of the original Outrun game in it. You drive 15 different Ferraris to impress your girlfriends. Lord Borak links us to a Time Extension article explaining that someone almost 20 years after release has come out with a very extensive update patch fixing and upgrading a number of issues affecting modern play. So if you have that, give it a play. As discussed on Discord, there is seemingly no way to buy it. So it is that at officially unofficial status of abandonware. I don't see the harm in doing it. Download it. You might call it piracy. I don't care. Tell them I said it was all right. Link in the show notes. There's loads more in the subreddit, loads more, but we're going to go well over this week, so we better move on, Neil. Does crime pay? Well, I guess so, maybe.
Sometimes.
It must do for some. There must be some criminals out there that nobody knows about that just quietly, that they don't feel a compulsion to tell people they're criminal and brag about it. They're just quietly making lots of money. I wonder if there's someone making just a modest little criminal income that nobody knows about, quite peacefully doing it. But
pride comes before a fall, Dave.
Yeah. In the early 90s, I watched a film called The Craze with my own brother. It's a true life story about two London gangster brothers, actually twins, and it's where the iconic line from the boxing ring comes, "Ladies and gentlemen, the Cry Brothers." And my brother and I still sometimes say it to each other. We both watched the film together, and at the end we agreed that we wanted to be criminals. Proper, organised criminals, but do it clever, don't get caught. The Cray brothers had a problem in that they weren't quiet about it.
And it was going so well until you announced it here, Dave.
Just like my idea to become a game developer, which never happened, as far as anyone knows, I'm not into organised crime and I've never broken the law.
You could have mashed the two up and you could have created a game about breaking the law, Dave. maybe about stealing cars.
Good idea. And while the appeal is there from the film, it isn't really. I don't want to be a criminal. I don't want to have to worry about things, the stress, and of course, the guilt.
Exactly what a criminal would say.
But it doesn't mean that we can't do it from time to time. A submission from Black Omega UK is a YouTube video in a podcast format talking about Syndicate. Now, Syndicate is a Bullfrog game, a fantastic game, and you take on the role in the near future of a crime organisation set on global domination. It's a superbly popular game from 1993, set in a cyberpunk dystopia where world government has failed and you're trying to get your corporation to control the world. It did get a sequel, it had some cancelled sequels, and a reboot as a shooter, which shouldn't have happened, and it was super popular at the time. One of my favourite games of all time. It's live action tactical, so it feels a bit like Cannon Fodder, but not quite. And there's a lot of a strategy element to outside missions, doing research, deciding which mission to do, equipping your mercenaries. So it's a very good blend. I'd recommend the video podcast to listen to, and I'm not going to recap it here. Listen to it on its own. But I want to talk about crime in games. I don't want people to be criminals, but in games, it's a wonderful thing to explore. Bullfrog definitely had a knack for coming out with this type of crime or dodgy moral choices and exploring the nasty side of things, or the naughty side of things. We've talked about Grand Theft Auto earlier, named after a USA crime. That's from DMA, not Bullfrog. But I suspect Peter Molyneux had a very thick, wicked streak through him, because whenever you look at Bullfrog games, there's usually some kind of cynical or satirical approach to being able to do naughty things or wicked things. And you've got Dungeon Keeper, and you've got, even in Theme Hospital and Theme Park, you've got a bit of that going on. There's definitely an allure to doing things in a game that we can't do in real life. But it's not a new thing. If you look back at movies from the cowboy films, there's crime films and TV shows about detectives and so on. Of course, the Cray film I mentioned, which does explore evil people. But I can't think of that many films or TV shows where the protagonist is unapologetically evil and without them getting their comeuppance at the end. There's plenty of outlaws and dark heroes, but I can't put my finger on any show where the main character is just downright bad, a criminal, and that's the point of it, and it's celebrated without the show telling you, look, this is a bad person, you don't really want to succeed, except where they eventually they do get their comeuppance, and it's built up towards that. But Breaking Bad is the closest thing I can think of, and it doesn't quite work that way, because he does, of course, spoilers, it doesn't quite end the way with Sunshine and Roses. So I'm wondering, is Syndicate the first game where you're stone cold evil criminal? You're not an anti-hero. It's not a comedy thing, but you're just bad. I tried to think of other ones. I can think back to Wizardry 4. But Wizardry 4 it kind of felt like a fan mod where you're the bad guy from the original Wizardry, and you're coming back and there's heroes trying to go after you, but it doesn't really go into the same way that Syndicate does. So what do you think, Neil? Is it fun being bad?
Oh, it's always fun being bad. It's fun being bad. It's the repercussions that are not fun, which is why we like doing it in video games.
Yeah.
I like bad. I like... sometimes like dark video games. So Max Payne, for example, you're not bad. You're out for revenge because of the terrible things that have happened to your family. But it's got a real dark feel to it, and it works really well with that bullet time mechanic. And you want to make the baddies suffer, which in some way makes you a little bit bad. But there's lots of examples of breaking the law in video games. Frogger, Dave. Frogger. Oh. You're jaywalking. Which is illegal.
Can you get arrested? Do you ever get the police arresting frogs?
It depends if they're feeling froggy, Dave. Bagman. So in Bagman, you're a criminal. You have to grab bags of cash, put them in your wheelbarrow, and get out without being caught. That's an early arcade game. You're a thief, so you're bad. Monty on the Run. You've broken out of prison. You're running from the authorities. You're receiving the help of safe houses from the criminal underworld. So that's pretty bad. Street Fighter. Those fights aren't licensed. Those are illegal fights.
You're a hero in that.
Jack the Nipper. You've got a naughty meter, so you go around smashing things up. But yeah, really bad. It's got to be Exidy's Death Race, 1976 game. Have you ever played this one? It's like a little top down,
I've heard of it,
driving a car around, and I think it's people you are chasing. It might be gremlins or something, but it's certainly humanoid things.
The robots are not real people.
You're chasing them in your car specifically to mow them down for points. That was the first video game to really cause moral outrage. So I think that one's got to be up there. Exidy's Death Race. You're pretty bad, but not to the level of organized crime. That's wanton violence. Syndicate. You're this organized crime syndicate. You're strategizing. Is that a word? You're planning ahead. You're planning how you're going to be bad. You're arming yourself. You're choosing your kit and how you can best achieve your mission of being bad. There's not too many examples of that, really. Dungeon Keeper, maybe that comes later though. But yeah, absolutely. Gaming is escapism. Sometimes you want to do bad things, which is why things like Thief are cool. Sneaking up on people, garrotting them quietly.
You're still a hero in Thief, though.
You are still a hero.
Yeah.
Carmageddon.
You're not a hero in that.
You're mowing people down.
Yeah.
But you don't have to. You could choose to just race the race and not mow people down. But
you're in Carmageddon, aren't you?
Yeah. There is a line, though, with these things where if you cross that line, it's very obvious that the game is doing bad things for bad things' sake. This happens in any This is not just video games. For the shock value, it has to tie in with the story and the mechanics to work well. Otherwise, it just feels cheap. It just feels cheap. You're just trying to shock me for the sake of trying to shock me, and that's no fun for anyone.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, since Syndicate, there's been a huge number of them. I don't know. Is Syndicate the one that started the genre? I don't know. People in comments will likely tell us. I'm not saying that it is. I'm just saying it's the first one I can think of. But you mentioned the cheap, kind of edgy stuff that came out that was just intended to be provocative, had some bullying in it, and I've no real interest in that. But there are games like John Romero's Empire of Sin. There's the various browser-based Mafia games. Remember, we had all that going on?
And this all ties in with that mid-90s gaming is growing up, but we're still going to be quite juvenile about it. Advertising as well. John Romero is going to make you his, and all the rest of that sexy adverts. I remember football games, soccer games, because they're big in this country, but they'd start putting page 3 models, strippers in the adverts with skimpy shorts on, just sexualizing violence, all of these things to say, look, we're grown up, but it wasn't grown up at all. It was the teenagerification of video gaming rather than the actual growing up. Yeah. That's what that all tied in with.
I remember a game that I put back on my computer recently and managed to get to work called Chaos Overlords. It's not a particularly famous game, but it's a board game style computer game where you're trying to control a city with your crime syndicate hiring various different gangs. But I think the most famous criminal game is Untitled Goose Game, where you take on the role of a goose and you're not a very nice goose. Not
Goat Simulator. It's the animals, isn't it? Why are animals such idiots?
I just like the idea of the goose just being an absolute... So I want for next week everyone to turn to a life of crime and see how much money you can make between now and next week. No, I don't. I think I like my crime in games only and where it's fun and harmless.
Time now for our community question of the week. And last week we were talking about owning digital games that you have never played. We were talking about Steam libraries, weren't we? And we asked the question, what does your Steam pile of shame look like? Share it with us. And we did this through SteamIDfinder.com, which calculates this for you. And we found out that Dave had a pile of 137 unplayed games in Steam, enough money spent to buy 4 Steam Decks, over $1,600. I say spent. Some of them would have been on deals. Some of them would have been bundles. But if you paid full retail, you would have had $1,600 in your pocket, Dave. and you wouldn't have needed to have turned to a life of crime. So let's see how you answered these questions this week. Are we out of contest mode, Dave?
We are out of contest mode.
Okay.
The first one is incredible.
Okay. Do you want to do the first one then?
Yeah. So Galdier says, and he links to his pile of shame. I'll tell you what it is after I've read out the rest of the comment. He says, some of that thinks I played. I've only farmed the cards in Idolmaster. So I think he's maybe talking about the Steam. If you play a game in Steam, you get these 3 little cards that you can use to combine for little kind of a meta game within Steam. He says, there were so many games I played them when I was young that I couldn't afford to buy, so I'm paying my dues, I suppose, which is fair enough. This is him turning around a life of crime. And he says the good thing about Steam is that you can do family share and your children and grandchildren can enjoy them as well, which sounds a little bit of a justification for wasting money. And Neil, guess what? Have you looked to see what it is yet?
Yes, I was shocked to see it. I'm scrolling through the list of games. Max Payne 3's in there.
Yeah. So there are 1,617 unplayed games in Galdier's pile of shame. They've only played 62% of the games in the collection. Pile of shame value, $18,225.13. Enough to buy 45 Steam Decks. And there are loads in there. There are loads.
That's got to be some kind of record. Yeah. Wow. His second most played game is a game called Brotato.
Brotato.
Yeah. I've not heard of that one, but it must be good. He's put 67 hours into Brotato.
Total value of Steam collection today, $58,803.52. I'm going to say he spent a fraction of that because the time you get humble bundles and so on. Yeah. Anyway,
right. Our next answer comes from a. Why have you given me this one? It comes from a user called 7A656472696366B. Catchy. I preferred oven chips. Says, interesting. There are 38 unplayed games in my pile of shame. They've only played 74% of the games in their collection. Pile of shame value $512.74. They say, that's fine, whatever. I also have dozens of games I've played for less than 10 minutes. Not because they're bad, because I'm too lazy to learn new games. The worst thing, though, is my most played game, 3,400 plus hours in Civ 4. And I played the pirated version for years before that, before I got it on Steam. Seriously depressing. Those 3,400 hours could have been spent playing guitar, building a business, gone metal detecting, or learning to speak Old Norse. Instead, I wasted my time playing Civ 4 using the same leader and the same settings over and over again. Help. Wow, 3,400 hours.
Colony Activist says, I cannot get the Steam Finder to work for me, so the best I can say is I purchased 466 games and played 10 of them.
Jeez.
I'll shut up now.
Wow. 3,400 hours, by the way, is 141 days.
Yeah. Did you ever get Steam Finder to work for you, Neil?
No, didn't work. And then I turned off my public profile again because I don't want people seeing how many hours I've spent on Silent Service 3. Lots of answers here. Who else have we got?
Tungsten Orchid. Out of the 190 games in my Steam library, I've played 23 of them, which means 167 unplayed.
He says this doesn't count the 87 games on GOG that I got, where I've only played 14 of them. Again, you just grab them when they're free. You grab them when they're on deals. Fuskit says, I don't use Steam or any similar services. That must be difficult to do modern gaming. Says, I was given a big box of specky games by a friend 20 years ago, and they were worth nothing. All the usual suspects, a mixture of jewel cases, full price big box games, and it's half full. I've never owned a working Spectrum. Do they count? Okay.
A box of shame, yeah, right.
Yes, it is a physical box of shame. Yes, that counts. Any more that jump out for you, Dave?
Yeah, there's one that could be you here. Battle Station. In the last 2 years, I bought 51 big box, or not so big for 8 and 16-bit, different combat flight sims. I'm yet to play more than 2 or 3 of them. I say I have a problem, but I've kind of collected almost all the ones that are available, so I had a problem. Now it's over. I'm fine again.
Nothing wrong with that. Flight sims don't count. You can't be shamed by a flight sim. Thank you to everyone who took the time to answer. Do go and have a read at reddit.com/r/this week in retro to see what everyone else in our lovely community is saying about their Steam pile of shame, and see how it compares to yours.
Pile of shame.
Pile of shame. And that leads us to this week's question of the week. Comes back to being bad in video games. What are your favorite moments of being bad in video games? Maybe it's a game in which you're supposed to be bad. Maybe it's not, but you found a way to be evil. Share your evil stories. So that happens on the subreddit. Thank you, as always, for taking the time to listen. We're looking forward to hearing your evil stories. We're looking forward to your submissions of new stories for next week. So please do go and submit those. Once again, if you'd like to support the show and you enjoy our company, head to patreon.com/r/this week in retro, if only to keep Dave in cool t-shirts. And make sure you subscribe and like and do all of that stuff that helps to spread the word.
Write us a review. If you've got this far in, write us a review.
And send Dave a postcard. His home address is in the show notes, as always. Anything else to add, Dave, before we wrap this up?
No, I'm fine. I think that was great.
Great. Okay, take care, everyone. I did do an accent there. Squeezed it in. See you next time. Take care. He's waving. Bye-bye. He's waving.
Bye-bye.
This Week in Retro was presented by Neil from RMC The Cave and Dave. It was produced by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcaster, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/This Week in Retro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. If you watch This Week in Retro on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.